Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
The Supreme Court took up a case today that could have major implications for San Diego's homelessness crisis. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Justices are hearing arguments about whether an Oregon city's ticketing of homeless people violates their Eighth Amendment rights, which bans cruel and unusual punishment. It's the most significant appeal involving unhoused Americans to reach the Supreme Court in decades. And KPBS reporter John Carroll says a group of San Diegans were outside federal court today to send a clear message to the justices.
But jail is not the answer.
Their message carried through signs and voices. We need housing, not handcuffs.
Housing ends homelessness, not arrest, not fines.
Martha Sullivan with the San Diego Housing Emergency Alliance organized this protest. Several of the people demonstrating have experienced living on the streets. They joined others in cities across the U.S. today, demanding the Supreme Court, in their words, protect the constitutional rights of unhoused people with no place to go. This case has its origins more than 800 miles north of San Diego in Grants Pass, Oregon. Johnson versus Grants Pass began in 2018 when 3 homeless people sued Grants Pass. They said police were fining them and jailing them, even when there was no shelter space available. They said the city was punishing them unconstitutionally based on the status of being involuntarily homeless. The case made its way to the Supreme Court after the Ninth Circuit Appeals Court ruled in the plaintiff's favor.
The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that sided on behalf of the plaintiff, Johnson, also ruled it was cruel and unusual punishment to do so. It's unconstitutional.
San Diego has its own ban on encampments in certain areas, and local officials are watching this case closely. San Diego County's district attorney filed an amicus brief in the case supporting the city of Grants Pass. There's another aspect of this issue, the intersection between race and who is most likely to become homeless.
You can see it visually on the streets where nearly 30% of all unhoused people are of African descent. Yet we only make up less than 5% of the county.
Yusef Miller with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition says legislation is needed that instead of going after people who don't have anywhere to live, instead targets the poverty that got them there.
Our homeless population is over-policed and they're over-arrested, so we cannot arrest our way out of the homelessness crisis. The only thing that's going to help the unhoused is housing.
A decision from the Supreme Court is expected sometime later this summer. A landmark case out of a small Oregon town that will have national implications for years to come, no matter what way it goes. John Carroll, KPBS News.
The storm and subsequent flooding of January 22nd happened 3 months ago. The administration has continued its efforts for local residents by setting up disaster loan outreach centers and has assumed the primary role in disaster relief efforts. The organization helps flood survivors apply for loans that will address property damage and other financial burdens. Flood survivors can consult with customer service representatives who will help them in navigating the application process at no cost.
Because we saw the need of still assist the residents of San Diego, and we want to help. We want that to be here for anybody that needs that help.
And the deadline for property damage loans was initially set for Friday, but the SBA is giving flood victims a grace period. The disaster loan outreach centers are currently located at the Mountain View Recreation Center and the Spring Valley Library.
We have fairly quiet weather overnight tonight. Temperatures are going to be into the 50s in most areas, a little cooler at Mount Laguna, upper 40s there. Campo 45. Borrego Springs will stay a little warmer at 62. And we still have some pretty warm air in place for tomorrow in many areas across the interior. A little bit of cooling around midweek. A quick look at the reservoir levels after the wet season has now come to a conclusion. We have a nice surplus in most reservoirs. We're going to look at that complete forecast, and we'll track the next system into other parts of California soon.
Well, today is Earth Day, and it was celebrated all around the region. San Diego County held its Earth Day Fair, where many groups promoted their environmental causes. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge was there, and here's some of what he saw.
The County Operations Center became a village of tents, giving away free stuff and displaying many items, all trying to express what Earth Day meant to them.
It's a really special day to me because it's all about community coming together and really figuring out what we can do based on our shared priorities for climate action.
Climate action groups were there, so were colorful creatures like owls, amphibians, and tarantulas, all native to San Diego. Habitat preservation is the goal of the Multiple Species Conservation Program, or MSCP. Bethany Principe is the program coordinator. They have a list of species that need land to live on and to move across the region.
We have rare plants, we have cactus wren, we have gnatcatcher, which are both birds, we have horned lizards, which are the reptiles, we have arroyo toad, amphibians, we have berry shrimp, which are invertebrates, and we also have mountain lion and mule deer, which are the mammals.
Preserving land and habitat means acquiring land, which requires money from San Diego County and from partnerships. A preservation plan has been adopted for South County.
In our MSCP Preserve system, which is including federal and state partner lands, county lands, and private mitigation, that's going to be about 98,000 acres. And right now we're at 80,000 acres, which is about 82% of our preservation goal.
North and East County are yet to come. A few steps away from land preservation, the San Diego Association of Governments was promoting Bike Anywhere Day to get people out of their carbon-emitting cars. Erica Sari is a consultant to Sandag's Transportation Demand Management Program. Bike Anywhere Day is May 16th, when people are supposed to bike wherever they want.
It could be, to your local coffee shop or to the park or to the school.
The annual event has been around for decades. It used to be called Bike to Work Day.
And during the pandemic, as we know, many things changed. The dynamics of getting to work, people are working hybrid schedules, some people are working completely from home.
So don't bike to work, just bike anywhere. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, opening statements begin in the criminal hush money trial of former President Donald Trump. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The crowdsourced online historical marker database has 375 entries for San Diego County. Most chronicle Spanish colonial, early American settler, and U.S. military pasts. But just a handful mention the millennia-old history of Native Americans in the area. KPBS's Amita Sharma looks at just a speck of what Kumeyaay life once was here.
The tranquility near Antonio Guara's grave on a recent morning belies the Native American resistance leader's violent end. He was convicted of murder, theft, and treason in January 1852, and soon after,
they took him out, blindfolded him.
Kumeyaay Community College President Stan Rodriguez is standing next to Guara's final resting place inside El Campo Santo Sanctuary in Old Town San Diego, a historical marker. He describes what came next.
They walked him up the street to this freshly dug grave, had him go on his knees. His hands were tied behind his back, and he said, "I wish to apologize for the things that I've done in the past, and I wait to hear the same from you." He didn't hear it. They shot him. So that's fell in. He was buried.
The execution is a snapshot of the cruelty and injustice local tribes endured, first under the Spaniards who came to stay in 1769 and started the San Diego Presidio, the tribes were forcibly converted. Families were split and turned into servants. Rodriguez says the Americans continued the brutality. The first governor of California, Pete Burnett, issued bounties on the heads of Native Americans.
50 cents for a child, $2.50 for a woman, $5 for men. Over $1.5 million was paid off. Our numbers prior to California becoming a state were over 85% Native to 15% non-Native. Within 20 years, the numbers had dropped by over 80%.
Before the invasions, the Kumeyaay and other tribes lived here for millennia, or since time immemorial, as Rodriguez puts it.
We see this place all the time. No, but very few people realize there was a very large Kumeyaay village here. And there were communities all through San Diego, all through the Bay, all around on the Silver Strand, Coronado, National City, and downtown.
He says men, women, and children in the villages rose before the sun. They'd make tule boats to fish. They'd harvest salt, Torrey pine nuts, and plant oak trees. They did control burns. They created mosaic patterns. But scan a historical marker database, and there is scant mention of the rich and sophisticated Kumeyaay history. The database is assembled by the public and has 375 entries for San Diego County.
Crowdsourcing and those kinds of sites are a really good reflection of American culture and how we look at cultures.
San Diego historian and archaeologist Richard Carricos says academia is working to correct the perception that history begins when the Europeans arrived. The database does include markers for an old Kumeyaay natural kitchen, pictographs, and an ancient Kumeyaay village, Ponhe, but it omits the tribe's at least 4,000-year-old history in what is today called the Ramona Grasslands Preserve.
This is a Kumeyaay village site called Pamu, which probably means gathering place or place of the singers, because they had a lot of music and singing in their cultures.
The area had 2 springs, a female creek and a male one. Carricos says if a Kumeyaay woman wanted to have a son, she would drink from the male spring and vice versa. The land's oak trees' acorns were a major food source, and they traded shell beads.
If you could go back in time, you would see huts sitting out here called wa. That's the Kumeyaay word for them. You would see huts sitting out here. We're in an area where they were doing a lot of tool manufacturing, and they were importing lithic material, stone material, from as far away as Mammoth, Coso Hot Springs, and from Baja California, and from the Salton Sea area.
Steve Benegas is chair of the museum committee at the Verona Cultural Center and Museum. He says leaving out whole histories of ethnic groups, whether in databases or classrooms, robs people of knowledge and understanding of who we are collectively as human beings.
They're missing a big chunk of humanity, a big chunk of spirituality, big chunk of time.
He adds the omissions not only doom us to repeat history, but keep us in the dark about who and what remains. A sign in the museum is a reminder of that message. It says of the Kumeyaay, quote, "We're still here." Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
And this story is part of NPR's special series this week on historical markers. President Biden marking Earth Day by unveiling billions of dollars in new grant funding for solar energy. This is the latest in a string of climate and conservation announcements made in recent days. Michael Yoshida gives us a look at how these could play a factor in the 2024 election.
President Joe Biden celebrating Earth Day by announcing $7 billion in grant funding for solar power. The administration saying the money will allow nearly 1 million households in low-income and disadvantaged communities to benefit from solar power, saving more than $350 million in electric costs annually and more than $8 billion over the life of the program.
It's a big deal. This new Solar for All program means that 900,000 households, 900,000, will have solar on the rooftops for the first time and soon.
Biden's announcement comes days after his administration barred oil drilling in nearly half of the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska, setting up a clear contrast with former President Donald Trump.
I want to drill, drill, drill.
During his push for a second term, Trump has spoken harshly of climate and conservation policies.
And I will repeal Joe Biden's insane ethanol industry killing electric vehicle mandate.
Differing views that could play a role in a close election.
There's a clear contrast in this race.
Biden supporters hope highlighting his climate stance is one way to regain enthusiasm with young voters who were a key part of his 2020 win.
We've got to make sure folks understand that and hear that. That's why you run a campaign. That's why you'll see stark differences when it comes to combating climate change between the policies of President Biden and what Donald Trump has done in the past and wants to do in the future.
In Washington, I'm Michael Yoshida reporting.
Volunteers around San Diego participated in the annual Creek to Bay cleanup over the weekend. One of the cleanup sites was the Quarry Creek Preserve in Oceanside. Video journalist Carolyn Corellis shows us the work and why that site has historical and cultural significance.
Our tribe, the San Luis Rey Band of Mission Indians, does not have a reservation, but we do protect our cultural sites here in the Oceanside area. One of our sites here is El Salto Falls that is we saved from being destroyed by development, that here in this Buena Vista Creek area. It is a sacred site. It is registered as such.
They didn't just survive, but thrived out here for 10,000 years before the Europeans began showing up in the late 18th century. And they focused, of course, on places where there were natural sources of water. A lot of the sites that were out in this area, of course, have been developed. A lot of times, current transportation corridors follow ancient trails, and this, where the 78 runs, was a natural migration route for tribes between the coast and the inland area.
This area is particularly important to us because it's a combination of Native American cultural site plus all of the value of having a natural habitat area with a creek through it like this. These areas don't work in isolation, so you really need to care about the entire watershed, what's upstream, all the way to the coast, because what flows through this watershed ultimately ends up at the coast. And we have a wonderful functioning riparian area in here. Unfortunately, it's really being highly impacted by lots of trespass activity. Cleanups like this are really critical. When we started weighing this stuff several cleanups ago, 5,500 pounds of trash was removed and 400 pounds of recyclable on a one morning event like this.
We include monitoring for the general health of the ecosystem, monitoring for sensitive wildlife that use this area. Least Bales vireo is a federally threatened bird species that inhabits this riparian corridor. Trash is obviously an eyesore for the public, right? And it also, in a way, can encourage people to continue trespassing. You know, they see something that's already trashed and they think it's okay. So in a way, keeping the trash out is a way for us to just show them, like, hey, someone's watching this. There's land stewards that care about this land. But on a biological sense, yeah, the trash that accumulates here breaks down into, it doesn't biodegrade, but it breaks down through photodegradation if it's a plastic and can pollute our waterways. There's just so many animals that might inadvertently digest the trash that's here. If we just were to ignore the trash, it's hard to say whether or not the vegetation would be resilient enough to persist on its own.
The area we're at here at Buena Vista Creek, a little valley here, it's next to the Marone adobe. My family is connected with the Marone adobe. I used to drive by here back in the 70s. I was probably 14 or so, 13. My father used to point to that tree that was living over here by the adobe and say, that's where your great-grandmother was born. Lots has changed, a lot has stayed the same, as we can see in the creek, with the creek still running here. So I do have a personal connection to this place, and it is something that I value.
Well, we have some moving parts here this week, but no dramatic changes. It is a dry week in Southern California. The seasons are changing. The wet season has come to a conclusion here in San Diego for the most part. We are seeing the dry season begin to take shape. We'll have a slight cooling trend at midweek after a very warm weekend, and the next storm is only going to impact Northern California and other western states. It will stay to our north. Now tonight, into the metro area, we'll see some clouds creep in from the Pacific, and we'll get down to 59 degrees. And tomorrow, pretty decent day, 66. Could be a sprinkle or two near Oceanside, but most of us will stay dry, and we're going to be up around 70 in Escondido, 90 into Borrego Springs, and 56 at Mount Laguna. So Tuesday's forecast, again, a pleasant day for most of us, and we're still warm across the interior deserts. And Wednesday, still warm, but not quite as warm. So a slight reduction in our temperature is in the cards here for the middle of the week. By the way, beyond any isolated drizzle in northern parts of our coastline, you can see later this week we'll be dealing with a storm system that comes in with some moisture into central and northern parts of the Sierra into Friday, but it's going to largely miss us. It will bring a little cooling, but the precipitation will stay to our north. So again, a little bit of mist or patchy drizzle Tuesday morning, but no actual true rainfall, just a little bit of mist or drizzle. You might need to use the wipers a couple of times. Mid to upper 60s then for most of the second half of the week. Slight cooling down to 65 for Friday, and then another rebound into Saturday as we turn warmer. Great weather here this weekend. Inland areas, you can see there will be some low clouds in the morning. More sunshine in the afternoon, backing from the upper 60s to the mid 60s with this subtle cooling trend later this week. But then another rebound into Saturday. Into the mountains we go. A little breezy, if not windy, Wednesday and Thursday into Friday as well. Temperatures are going to be cooling a bit with that wind as well. And we're going to be stuck in the 40s for Saturday's high there in the mountains. The deserts, we're going from 90 back down to 75 with a significant cool down. It will be breezy, if not windy, in this transition as well. And then we're going to get windy again into Friday, with temperatures rebounding to 87 degrees. I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
San Diego County's best SciTech high school and middle school teams are back home tonight celebrating their efforts at the first Robotics World Championships in Houston over the weekend, and KPBS was there. Patrick Henry, Francis Parker, Torrey Pines, and Canyon Crest Academy made it to the playoffs before being eliminated. A San Diego community team called the Clueless won the middle school competition. They were from different schools and part of an alliance with students from Romania and South Africa. Street art often carries a negative connotation, and it's rare when street artists can work with city officials and law enforcement. But KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne says that was the case for murals that now surround Oceanside's Little League fields.
They are colorful murals depicting local culture. Art paying tribute to military and law enforcement. The famous Oceanside Pier, characters from the film The Sandlot, and graffiti art. It was a vision 4 years in the making.
To make it look better for our parks, our community in different ways, meaning we can have the city involved, we can have police department involved, we can have the artists involved, and at the same time we have the Little League where, you know, a bunch of these kids play.
Servando Ramirez Jr. is the president of Oceanside American Little League. He says it was beautiful to see street artists working hand in hand with city officials and police.
These artists do their work after hours, you know, in the dark, behind some alleys or on freeways or wherever. They get nervous when police department are nearby. Some of these artists were very scared or they were paranoid because OPD's walking up to them, shaking their hands, thanking them that there's a bigger picture here. And the bigger picture was to cross those paths, to say, hey, you know, we're not bad individuals for being, you know, artists or taggers.
Mike Lagos is an art curator with Oceanside Hit Ups. He helped bring different artists together for the murals.
It's all about community, bringing us together, because with gentrification happening in the city, it's kind of hard to like do stuff like this, because it's not, a lot of people are not open to, you know, graffiti or, you know, aerosol, even just aerosol art, because a lot of spots you can only paint with a brush.
He says Barrio Logan has Chicano Park, and he hopes this can be the start to something similar in North County.
We're an artsy town, you know, there's so many talented artists. We need to blast the walls. You know, I don't like looking at gray walls that
have other color gray paint over it from tagging, you know, like put some cool stuff up. People could be proud of. People are, man, there are going to be so many people that come here and take pictures with this stuff, and like photo shoots and models come out and people park their cars. Like, this is huge for the city.
And so far, Ramirez says the community has given nothing but positive feedback.
And then visitors that come from other leagues are also getting, you know, showing us love because it looks beautiful. I mean, I love it. I want people to come here to feel like this is their home. And, you know, what better way to do it besides, you know, giving them some art to look at, and it's going to be recognized. You know, maybe one day we can get it as famous as the Hollywood sign, you know what I mean? If you see any of these murals on social media or whatnot on magazines, you'll know that it is at Oceanside American Little League, Ronald Ortega Park.
With the backing of police and city officials, Ramirez and Lagos hope to expand more art throughout the city. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
And you can find this story along with more news from North County, San Diego, in our newsletter. North County Focus offers a quick recap of the big stories happening in North County, as well as a roundup of everything happening in the region. You can sign up for it at the link shown on your screen, kpbs.org/North County Focus. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. NPR's Morning Edition sits down with an associate professor at Barnard College about a wave of protests on college campuses. And on KPBS Midday Edition, we're looking at the history of surfing and local efforts to promote diversity in the sport. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.